I was like kind of coming out of this emotional fog a little bit and coming to terms with like the decision I made and stuff, a few months after. And then the pandemic happens and then everyone's just stuck at home and the world like just shifted.
You said something that was interesting, coming out of the emotional fog, and maybe you touched on what that fog was, but do you recall like why you were emotionally foggy in that state?
Yeah, I think it just goes back to like attaching my identity to the business. And like when you sell the business, you're like, oh, I sold my soul or something like that. Like it's just really weird. It's hard to describe. Yeah, it's hard to describe.
Welcome to another episode of the Deeper Than Dough podcast. Today we have Chad Ingram. He is a man of many tales, most recently racing cars, flipping cars, but he's got an interesting story with a company called Jump, local to Utah, correct?
Yeah, that was my old startup.
Yep. And now he's working on something super cool with distributed developer talent all across the world. And we got Bennett here, who is co-hosting, and we're excited to jump in.
Welcome to me and you guys.
You were waiting on the welcome. I was also...
Well, it's funny. It was just funny to be on the other side because I also host a podcast in town. Yep. And it's nice to be on this side of the table.
Well, Chad, welcome to the Deeper Than Dough podcast.
Thank you.
Give us a little bit of your side of the background.
Yeah, just on Distro or my background individually.
You choose.
All right, yeah. So started Distro. I started my first growth startup in 2013, and then I exited that in later 2016, and then took a small break there, and then started a company called Jump, and we were VC backed. It grew really fast, and then we sold that like a few months
really,
before.
really fast.
Yeah, it grew really fast. We grew, we had 80 people. We raised about $10 million, and then we, $6.5 million in annual recurring revenue in just a few years, and then we sold that like a few months before the pandemic, actually. And so then there was like
what was that business? I'm not.
So it was called Jump, not to be confused with some of the local people that know about like the what's it called?
Trampoline
the
parks.
VR, no, not that. Okay. The indoor skydiving thing.
Okay,
it's like VR.
Oh, yeah,
you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
So there's a jump park named that. But anyway, different company. But it was a straight competitor to Podium, who's still in town. So we did like text message, marketing, communication as a customer engagement platform, and so that was really big, 5-6 years ago. And so anyway, the pandemic happened. Then just spent a ton of time with my family. That was awesome. And then started driving race cars professionally in late early 2021. And did that for a couple of years until I was like, I need to do something else. In addition, I need to do something in addition to this. And so I started Distro, started assembling the team for Distro in 2021, the fall of 21.
And I found out about Distro because I was driving down the freeway during the cookie wars. When we had some billboards up, Crumble had some billboards up, and it said distro.io greater than Crumble without the E to not be confused. I'm like, What is this, dude?
Wait,
so
that
awesome.
was the tagline?
That was pretty funny.
He threw that up on a billboard. That's all it said was distro.io greater than symbol Crumble.
Genius.
And I was like, I love this guy. And then
if we didn't put the E, then it might mean we wouldn't get sued, right? Like
yeah.
Did you use the same coloring too?
No, we just used our style guide, but everyone knew.
Okay,
like it was really funny. So I got texted like LOL by 1 million people.
Okay.
It's really funny.
And I looked up your company because I was like, who are these guys?
Who are these jerks?
Yeah. No, I loved it.
We had when was that?
Bully and the Bully,
Yeah, no, for sure.
That was a year ago, probably. Maybe even a little bit over a year.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, so thanks for the idea. We would have never thought to do that had you not gotten a cookie war with your competitor.
Yeah.
So
since we planned that,
Ryan Reynolds, one of his only marketing tactics is taking relevant content and blowing it up with like events that are happening. So good job of being a genius and jumping in there.
Do you feel like it sounded like it worked? I mean,
we got attention for sure. I took advantage of your situation.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then explain a little bit about Distro.
So Distro is an app. So like the idea for Distro really came from my experience in my last startup. So our growth, like heyday at Jump, my last startup was 2017, 18, 19. And even then, pre-pandemic, like the demand for, technical talent, so like software engineers, product designers, product managers, it was like still super intense. And then the pandemic happened and it got much, much worse. And so I was experiencing those problems at my last business. And so I kept thinking about this, and like the problem that we solve is that like when you're a tech company, startup or larger growth company, you need people so bad, and there's just such short supply. Like you'll give like a 28-year-old, a base of $225,000, and then they're still going to ask you for a raise next quarter.
Yep.
Like it's that bad.
And equity.
Yeah, for sure. Options, like your any types of incentives, things like that. Like it just gets really intense. It's not sustainable. And so out of desperation, as a leader, you go and you hire and oversees like a dev shop. Have you guys heard of that term?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So you hire a dev shop just because it's cheaper, it's faster, but like it's really difficult to make that work well. And so on CTOs and, startup founders, they hate it. So I was like, why don't we just remove that out of the equation and create a platform that lets them independently hire people, find people, interview them, and pay people through the platform.
And a dev shop is you're hiring a company to do a project where
Correct.
You're saying, no, we'll just give you the actual developer and you'll work one-on-one with them.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And with Distro, because you're in charge, you get to set like the regions you want to hire from. You get to set the budget you're hiring. And then, of course, you ultimately decide who you're hiring. So it usually works,
Because you're doing the interview and everything rather than just some random
Right.
handful of people working on your project.
You're running your process. So it's like no different than hiring somebody to work remote in Austin, Texas, as it would be to hire somebody in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Yeah.
And
is it focused on overseas or kind of just, you just answer that, right? You get to choose.
Yeah. I mean, you get to choose. So there are Americans in the platform, but it's pretty infrequent that they get hired, because when you meet somebody who's just as good as and impressive as somebody in another country who's 30% less, you're almost always going to choose the cheaper option. So that's what usually happens.
How are you vetting their quality? Because you're interviewing them on your end and pre-screening them, correct?
Yeah, so there's a whole automated process for us to like verify identity and get all their data, their profile data, and then they get to a point where they can be matched. So think about like for a customer, it's like a Tinder. Like I create, sort of my profile, and I want to be matched with people that make sense. And so in order to get matched, they actually go through like a like Zoom, like face-to-face interview. And then once that passes, then they can be actually matched in the platform.
Got it.
And so that way we're able to like really funnel, and we do some other stuff too, but like that's one way that really helps.
Okay, so when did you start the first one that you exited? 2013?
Yeah, 2013.
Okay, and then you exited that in 16. And how old are you right now?
So how old am I? 35.
Okay, 35. You've had 2 exits.
You love pain.
And you're on your third.
On my third, yeah.
So after those first 2 exits, especially that second one, which maybe was a larger exit than the first one, because you went and would you consider it a little retirement? Like how'd you look at it when you're like, I'm just not going to work for a little bit?
I'm comfortable, for sure. I always joke with people, and they'll ask, like, how was that? And I'm like, well, I'm not done. I've still got a lot of energy. And I thought like I didn't make enough money to be like buying jets and stuff, but like I can choose to not work if I want. Like I can kind of enjoy my life or spend time. I don't have to like rush and make bad decisions because I'm strapped financially, right? So in that sense, it's great. But like then I also thought, like, wouldn't it be such a waste to have learned so much on the last one and then not apply all of those things that I learned? Like, wouldn't it be so much faster? Wouldn't it be so much more efficient? And it's true, it is. It's way more efficient.
So jumping into this other one, I mean, how long was that break that you took?
Like 2 years.
Okay.
So there was like a little, it was about 2 years. So, and there was like a little break. Like I helped another friend kind of get started in their startup. They really wanted me to be the CEO, and I just wasn't ready. Like I just emotionally, like I just didn't feel like I was ready to jump into something. I was ready to help. Like I felt, I was bored, I could help him. And then another friend, I helped him start, he actually, ironically, he needed a couple of like remote teams on his own. And so I helped him start those, one in Nepal and then another one in Mexico City.
And starting them navigating hiring and managing?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Like he just didn't even know where to start.
You got your feet wet.
Yeah, a little bit. So, I mean, that was still a couple years before, but at Jump, my plan was, if we were going to grow our team, we were going to start growing it with a distributed team. So I had already kind of been thinking about this for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, those 2 years that you weren't working and you're only 32 or whatever at the time, that's actually quite a lengthy amount of time to go.
Yeah.
And talk to me about the joy and fulfillment in your time. Was it more or is it less because you weren't focusing on something?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So, I mean, first off, let me start this by I think a lot of people give a pat on the back to some people who sell their business, but selling your business super sucks. It's like a daily colonoscopy for 4 or 5 months. It's like they're asking for everything, dude. Everything you can imagine. It's just this emotional wreck. And then you're kind of having to keep secret a bunch of stuff from your closest friends who are working with you,
Yeah.
and then you do tell them and then they can't help themselves. So they tell other people and it's just kind of like a shit show.
Was that a decision you made, is to not involve most of the key people?
It's a decision going forward.
Yeah.
I made a mistake and let certain key people know too early.
Got it.
And then they started talking about it and it just became more stressful. So the process of selling is stressful. Then after selling, it's emotionally stressful. Think about it. You go hard building a startup, like a growth startup with your friends and, your people who are your friends. You spend more time with them than you do your own spouse. Mm-hmm. And then overnight, boom, I guess I don't see you anymore on Monday. So with my deal, I didn't go. I made a choice not to continue with the company, which was kind of a problem for some. But I just knew I couldn't do it. So that was really hard, this kind of peel away of my identity. And so the months following Jump, I was actually super bummed and depressed, for a few months at least. And then there was also a sense where I felt like I was giving up by selling so soon. That was also kind of a hard decision.
Where did that come from? I mean, is that other people saying that, or you feeling like other people?
No, I think that was me. Well,
I
I had a few people tell me that. Yeah, for sure. I had a couple of my executive team members, kind of allude to that. I had a couple of just non-self-aware engineer employees tell me that.
For a reason, I was just thinking about that in the last week.
Well, maybe if it's okay, what was the impetus to sell? Because founders get in a spot where I have a lot of friends raising 10, 20 million right now. And it's do you keep going the next phase? Because things are built, processes are there, but you made a choice. So what was the...
It's very wise when you have a bird in the hand, right?
Yep.
So for me, I was under the pressure of raising a Series B. I'd raised a Series A, some bridge money, and things were going well, but there were still some things that were maybe going to be really stressful. We were an SMB sell, and so we were selling to smaller businesses, and those, traditionally have higher churn. And we hadn't hit that big churn wall yet, but it was coming, at some point. And so I knew okay, maybe it'd be better, for us and the investors to merge with another company or get bought by another company and kind of, join in this much larger fight. And so that was a decision I had to make. So if I didn't do that, going down the riskier path of raising a Series B, that's, its own thing. Can we do that? And if we don't do that, what are the implications? And so most tech startups go to die between the Series A and the Series B. Just because you raise a Series A doesn't mean you're going to make it all the way. And so it was kind of one of those things okay, would this be better for me, for our investors, and for some employees, to get acquired? And so ultimately we made that decision.
That's cool.
So, yeah.
So, I was thinking about it last week. One, because I think about selling all the time. And then, but the thought of anybody else judging when you sell, off, I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do because it's not about anybody else.
Yeah.
And I feel like other people, I don't know. I feel like that's pretty common of you went too soon or whatever, but it's well, what are you after?
Yeah.
What are you after? You're after the most amount of money, the most amount of stress, or you just want to freaking take a little break,
Yeah, it's true. And there's a lot of mechanisms to do that. I think had I had more experience like I do now, maybe I would have still sold. Maybe I wouldn't have, right? And it's not just, keep in mind, it's not just my decision, right? We have a board and, I was chairman and I could influence that. But Ultimately, I think we made the right move. And the pandemic would have been very hard on us, not having been part of a larger company. But you also asked about like, what was it like after, like during that 2-year period? Yeah. So going into that was tough because I kind of like we sold and then I was like kind of coming out of this emotional fog a little bit and coming to terms with like the decision I made and stuff, a few months after. And then the pandemic happens and then everyone's just stuck at home and the world like just shifted. Yeah. And now I'm like, okay, I guess this is what we're doing. So dude, I had like no plans, no expectations. Like I was consulting on a few little things. Like I also owned another like tiny small business. Like, but like getting up 9 to 5, like no way, or anything like a startup. Like, so I just kind of settled in and just spent time with my family, and that was great.
And you didn't have any clauses to stay on post-exit?
No, so that caused quite a big deal with our deal too. So they wanted me to go and run this whole division for small business tech that they were doing, is marketing tech, your sort of acquisition. And so, and then like 6 weeks before the deal was supposed to close, I told them, guys, I'm not going to do it. And so that caused quite a stir in the board and by the acquirer, and he was pissed and it was tough. So then, they wanted my COO to replace me doing that role. And then she didn't want to, and she ended up going to Divvy. And then somebody else ended up running the division. But they ultimately wanted to acquire the company, but it caused a little bit of a stir. So I'm pissing people off.
Good job.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times that's you sell it, and because we attach our identity to it. Yeah. Or maybe it's not even that so much. And maybe it is the people and the friends or whatever. But, you can keep those relationships. I think it's maybe more the identity. So is that good or bad? And then
it's bad.
And then you leave and then you're like, crap, now what do I do? So is the goal to go find something else to attach your identity to, or to learn how to not attach your identity to anything and just be content at that point?
That's what you have to do. So for me, like grinding out this startup, like I went hard, dude. Like I had my first kid towards the tail end of Jump. We had a baby when we were selling. And so like my wife was super cool with me working a lot. Like I worked a lot. I was always available late at night, early morning, that wasn't a decision. I just did that naturally because I obsess over stuff. And so that was just kind of how I approached it. So naturally, it made sense when going to sell or post-sale, like I'm like, well, what am I if I'm not the CEO of Jump? Like, what the hell do I do? And that was weird. And so now, I kind of remove myself a little bit from that and just look at it a little bit more objectively. We're growing super well. I'm still super happy to be the CEO. But like, that's not only who I am, if that makes sense. Like, I'm totally okay to also be a race car driver and a dad and whoever else,
Yeah.
But for a long time, all I was the CEO of Jump.
Did you do anything that helped you go through that process to help you realize that, to I guess, break free from that identity and say, I can identify as other things. That's not all I am. So
2 things. Like objectively, I think racing helped me do that. It kind of like was a pattern disrupt because it wasn't tech. I had to but it was also kind of like a small business. Like I had to like go get sponsors, create contracts, file entities. Like I still had to go like create this thing, but it was much smaller and it was so different. Like I had to go learn this whole thing. I volunteered for other teams and like learned this thing. So that was a good pattern disrupt, I think. But I think just slowly over time, because I was deciding, all right, do I just want to be like kind of a low key dude now and just make some small investments and, maybe buy a couple of smaller businesses that like are no stress and high cash and then just kind of like ride off into the sunset still, But that didn't excite me. Like I could easily do that. I even tried day trading for a while. I did that for like 3 months and I was just bored as hell. Like I was just like, okay, buy, sell.
What's
like
the purpose of this?
Yeah, like it was just because I was bored. And so I remember talking to my wife in early 21 when I was helping these other friends start their company. It was called Benny at the time. It was like a benefits app, and they wanted me to be CEO, and it just didn't feel right. But I wasn't like, I just didn't have this thing like getting me up every day to like go after the world, And I remember talking to my wife and saying, like, should I go build another startup or should we just kind of keep it low key the rest of our lives? And she said something to me, I'm going to screw it up, but she said, well, we didn't do this to be mediocre. And I was like, what? My wife's not like motivational speaker
or keeper.
Yeah, like, well, but, and it's just funny when she comes out with these zingers, because I'm not like, she's not like this big, like, hardcore. She's super low key. She just kicks it. But she'll come out with these things and it just like, you're like, whoa, all right, I'm woken up, you know? And so like, I just felt,
she wanted you out of the house, man.
yeah, that was the problem for sure. For sure, which we actually talked about. So day one, I just started to do Distro. You know what I did? I immediately went and leased an office.
Yeah.
That I didn't need because I like needed to leave.
Yeah.
You know, it's really funny, but yeah. And so I felt like dull before. Like I just like through that period, the 2-year period, I just felt like and now I feel like I'm on fire.
Well, you said something that was interesting coming out of the emotional fog, and maybe you touched on what that fog was, but do you recall like why you were emotionally foggy in that state?
Yeah, I think it just goes back to like attaching my identity to the business. And like when you sell the business, you're like, oh, I sold my soul or something like that. You know, like it's just really weird. It's hard to describe. Yeah, it's hard to describe.
Got it.
I had a small exit of a solar company, but I already had dirty dough. So it was just like, it was such an easy transfer.
You had a
because I was just like, yeah, here to here.
Yeah.
I still went through some of the kind of what I thought I would feel with money and what I didn't feel, or that the feeling didn't last.
Right.
So anyways, I thought it was really good for me to go through that I was 28 to be like, oh, I'm not after money actually.
Yeah.
And I kind of caused the reset. I mean, that's one of the reasons for the podcast, you know, and really going down, what am I after? And it's, well, I just want to be happy. And then, but it's not just being happy, because you can sell your jump and you can go smoke weed by the freaking, by the river for the rest of your life. But there's not, then it was like, well, what else are you missing? And then it's the fulfillment side.
Yeah.
And then that's a lot of times going and creating or whatever that is.
Yeah. It's not enough. Like it's not the money is not enough. It sounds cliche, but it's not about the money, or to say like it stops being about the money eventually. But it's true. Yep. Like when you don't have to really like look at prices when you're going to the grocery store, or care about the prices when you're going to dinner, or you can kind of buy whatever car you want or go on vacation. Like what beyond that? I don't know. So
I think it's, and you do see, like I was in Kenya a month or two ago.
Yeah.
And it kind of bothered me of, you know, everybody's like, oh, I'm so blessed because I don't live here, you know, like everybody's experience. And I don't know, it's like, oh, that's kind of are you saying they're not blessed? And then you
backsided compliment.
Yeah. But I know nobody intentionally meant that. But I looked up suicide rates in the United States, and it was like 1 in 17 people. Or sorry, 17 out of 100,000, or whatever the metric was.
Yeah.
But it was 17. And in Kenya, it was 6. So it was like, wait, this is almost a third. So like, are they blessed that they're not us?
Yeah.
You know, and it's, what are you actually after? And maybe in wealthier countries, what causes more suicide is, when I get XYZ, I'm going to be happy. Mm-hmm. And then you actually get it. And then you realize that it didn't give you what you thought it was going to give you. And then you're like, oh shit. Yeah. What's the point? You know?
Yeah.
I wonder if there's any truth to that or not. But that is something that I've, you know, like, if you just keep achieving and you keep telling yourself, I'm going to feel better on my next achievement, and then the next achievement comes and you don't, then it's like, you really have to figure out what you're going for. And money is just that tool. It's like, you're not after money, you're after an emotion. Mm-hmm. Figure out the emotion. Don't figure out, and then see if you can get there with or without the money.
Yeah, I call it, I've talked about this actually very specifically quite a few times. It's called the happy wins is what I call it.
Happy what?
The happy wins. I'll be happy when I graduate school. I'll be happy when my wife stops yelling at me. I'll be happy when, you know, and it just like goes over and over again. And you can place that into anything. I'll be happy when I sell my company and buy a jet. I'll be happy. Like, and that doesn't work. Like, it's just so, it's a lagging indicator of what it could be. And you've just wasted years of time while you're trying to achieve this thing. So I totally agree. I think you have to, I don't know, you have to find purpose in what you're doing.
So short of selling a company to figure that out, what advice would you give to somebody else to be like, this is how you can figure it out before you sell a company, or before you're 50 years old and you build good wealth, or you're 65 and you retire?
Yeah. I think outside of wealth, I think when somebody who mentored me years ago, like this was like 12 years ago, I sat down with him and he asked me a few specific questions. And I've posed these questions to other people over the years and say, where do you see yourself in 1 year? Where do you see yourself in 3 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And getting clarity around like what you want to do. And oftentimes that alone will help you like the journey of doing that will bring a lot of peace and happiness to whatever you're doing. So it's not just like, again, it sounds cliche, but like, you know, like finding happiness along the way as opposed to like when the event happens.
Yeah. And a lot of it, I mean, you can, in a perfect world, what would you do every day? And it's like, oh, I would go fishing. It's like, why don't you go fishing today?
No, absolutely.
Like, why can't you go fishing today? In a perfect world, I would spend way more time with my kids. It's like, what's preventing you from spending way more time with your kids today? Because how much Netflix are you watching rather than spending with your kids? And how much video games or whatever, or sporting events that you're watching instead of fishing or instead of racing or whatever like that. And I think that we wait when we think that we have to have nothing scheduled in the day and then we can go racing and fishing and play with our kids. It's like, no, we actually have time every single day. Figure out what you want and then just do it every day.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I have this like mastermind group of other tech CEOs that I'm a part of, and we go and meet every 6 months offsite, and it's fairly new, I guess, but we're meeting again in a month, I think, or next month. And somebody posed a question in the group like, "What are your morning routines?" And everyone starts listing off like, "Oh, I get up at this time and I do this for 30 minutes, and then this for 15 minutes, and whatever." And then that came to me, and I was like, nothing. So I decided a few months prior to this meeting, I was like, I'm not going to have a morning routine. My morning routine is to not take a meeting before 9 a.m. And so if I need to spend a little bit more time with my kids, if I need to read, if I need to meditate, if I need to do a cold plunge, you know, or what the things I like to do, but try non-routine. It's pretty amazing.
I like that non-routine.
Yeah.
Give yourself a little bit of creativity to step into it.
For sure. And think also like, I don't know, just the idea of like wealth creation or like perfect optimization. Like we're all going to die one day. What are we in a race to perfect it? You know, in a race to have as much money in our bank accounts as possible. Like definitely grow wealth, but spend it along the way.
Yeah, you don't want to be the richest guy in the graveyard.
Yeah, no, it's not helpful.
So when any founder that's building a fast-paced company like you did, there's typically the signs are imposter syndrome, or I'm not good enough, or am I making the right decision? How did you get clear on some of the things that would come into your brain as far as like what those were, and who would you seek outside help to balance ideas off of?
So for me, the way to go in building a startup or high growth company is to follow your gut. Okay, it sounds really oversimplified, but it's to follow your gut. The antithesis to following your gut is insecurity, because if you are secure, you're comfortable about the things that you think you should do, like the insecurity is what makes you question your gut. Otherwise, you would always listen to yourself. Yeah. Like you know your business and what you should do. And the only times when you question yourself is when you're feeling insecure about what either someone else is going to think or how it looks to other people. And like you have to be able to fight that. And at a high growth company, you have your own employees judging you, sometimes your own customers judging you, investors judging you, the community judging you. You kind of have to not give a shit. You just kind of need to do what you need to do.
So how did you get clear on that? Because for some people, that's a real thing. And did you do that within yourself, or did you find coaches to help you with it? Like,
honestly, I started a company, raised a bunch of money, lost a bunch of that money, and then sold it. And like that experience taught me to care less about what people think and just go perform.
Got it.
Like, you know what you need to do.
Yep.
It's constantly like question, do I fit the mold? Do I look like this business that investor invested in? I need to do that. Like, don't do that. Just do what you need to do. Do what works, you know? And you need more cowbell on that for sure.
Completely agree.
I like that a lot. That's something that, I mean, it's not just for CEOs, but just anybody. Stop caring about what people think, which is so freaking hard.
It is hard.
It's your life, right? The ticket, right?
Yeah.
No matter what you decide, especially in a franchise business, when you have 100 business owners. They're all business owners. They all have at least $250,000. So they all know more than you.
Yeah, it's true.
And it's just like, oh man, I love people pleasing, but at this, like out of 100 people, if we make a marketing decision, I know a third of them are going to hate it, a third of them are going to love it, and a third of them are going to be like, well, whatever. So it's just like, whatever. You just have to go.
As long as it's aligned to the business, if it makes the business win, then it's okay, right? Because the other
comes
business
back to just you trusting your gut and your intuition. It's like, this is what I'm doing. This is what you bought into. You bought into me and my vision. So take it or leave it.
Now, again, a performer is going to consolidate everybody's feedback and still look at it. You're still going to make a good decision. It's not that people's opinions don't matter, but ultimately a leader needs to lead. And that's, I think, what it comes down to. So the problem is that if you take all this consolidated feedback, you know what to do, and you're questioning it because of what it might look like. That's the problem.
I like it. Last question for you.
Yeah.
What do you want to be remembered by?
Ooh, it's a really good question. That's probably too tough of a question. I think there's like multiple categories.
You choose whatever category you want and run with it.
I think the impact that I would have made amongst my closest family and friends, like creating opportunity for people, like that to me is what I think about the most. Like creating a mechanism for people to grow and do what they want to do. That I think that would include my own children. I think that would include people I work closely with. I find a lot of joy in that.
I mean, Distro, the company sounds great because you're connecting people and empowering them by giving them jobs and empowering business owners to then build out their tech platforms, which leads a ton to empowerment, joy, fulfillment, all that. So
definitely.
All right, man. Thanks for jumping on. How does everybody connect with you?
Oh, you can reach me. My email is chad@distro.io. That's distro.io. Or you can go to our website and learn more info or connect with me on LinkedIn. Also the podcast, the No Instructions podcast, wherever you listen. Have a listen. It's a great one. And
there's a great episode coming out.
There is a great episode coming out where you will be on it.
Heck yeah. All right. Thanks, Chad. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.